Welcome to the Single Source Productivity Tools training video. My name is Chris Von Ehrenkirk. I'm with Single Source Systems, and today we're going to take a look at the current version of the productivity tools. Productivity tools are add-ons to Acumatica to enhance the productivity within the product. When we take a look on our menu after the product's been installed, you should see a workspace SSS Productivity Tools appear there. All of the current features are available in the productivity tools appear under that workspace. As new features are added to the productivity tools, they should appear here. I first want to go into the productivity tool preferences. When you first install the product, you will need to go into here and at least save the defaults. You'll notice here it's grayed out. What that does is it activates the current product. With the defaults. Now, if we take a look at some of the things on this form, you'll see that there are feature activation right now for both Agreement and Questionnaire Designer, and all of the most relevant forms have been linked by single source here, and you can activate and deactivate them if you want your users to have access to certain forms and have the agreement and questionnaire tabs appear there. Again, the most relevant forms within Acumatica have been linked there by single source. Additional forms can easily be linked by single source as customer needs arise. If you need an additional form linked, contact single source systems. Notice in here too, there are a couple of default numbering sequences that are set automatically in the system. You can change them or add another numbering sequence if you'd like to number your questionnaires and agreements. If I take a look under the numbering sequence currently, for example, for the Agreement Designer, this is the default numbering sequence, which is just sequential numbers to start. But again, you can change that, or if needed, add additional numbering sequence that you can link here on the productivity tool preferences. The next area we're going to cover is the Agreement Designer. Just to show you a couple of examples of agreements that can be generated, just to give you some ideas. This is an HVAC service agreement that's run off of the service contract, and again, you can format this in the template area and get this kind of output. So this has various sections in it. It's pulling in data from the system, as well as having a table that has the spring, summer, winter, and fall maintenance we're going to do, pricing, and signature. Another example which we are going to use to look at how to build a template is a service order quote here. This is run off the service orders form. And again, it's got various sections, pulling in customer information, etc., and also pulling in the pricing from the service order quote into the document. So these are a couple of examples of how you can use the Agreement Designer within forms in Acumatica to be able to generate agreements to send to the customers. We're going to take a look at this one. First, we're going to go into the agreement templates, which is where these are created. And when I go into there, I've got an agreement template that I've already created called service order right here. And I'm going to show you how that generates this information inside of a service order. So on our agreement template, we've got a top section which has a template ID, which is unique, usually that you can use to define what it is that you're doing. Description. And then this field's very important. The valid for field tells the system where does this template become available within Acumatica. So in this case, this service order agreement template appears on the service order screen is available to create agreements there. The file name can be set up this way. We have some text SOW for statement of work, as well as some fields from Acumatica on the service order, which include the service order number and agreement number. I'll show you how to get those fields shortly. But this will make a smart file name that you can then identify the file that you're looking at. Notice at the end it has .pdf here. You have two options, .pdf or .docx, as to how you want to save the file when you generate it. And obviously, if you used a docx, that would allow you to do some editing to it before you sent it to the customer. So it depends on your preference there. These are activated, so the active checkbox is checked there. And that's basically, once you've done that, you can save this and start building your agreement. The first area I want to look at on my agreement is the header section. Notice that there's a header and a page header. The page header appears on every single page, and that's down here. Notice that I have a logo here, which is the system logo, normally in the upper left-hand corner, that you have for your Acumatica logo. Usually it's your company logo. And also another field which is actually pulling in a field from the document, from the service order. So in this case, it's the service order number, and the way that was added in here is simply by clicking Insert Data Field. So all the data fields related to the service order are available within their tables here. And to get the service order number, I looked under service order, and there was the order number. And I can just click on that, and it'll add that down into the text area that I'm working in. So those were added in, and so if I look at my document, there's my logo for my page header at the top left with the service order number appearing when I run it from the service order. My regular header right here is only going to be on the first page, right below the page footer, or page header, excuse me. So in here, you can see that appeared right here with it pulling in the data from those fields. So we have our page header on every page up here, and our regular header, which is just on the first page. Now let's take a look at the footers. They're very similar. The footers are on this tab right here. And again, we have a document footer, a regular footer, and a page footer. Page footer is going to appear at the bottom of every single page. The regular footer, document footer, is going to appear only on the last page. So when I look at my document, I only have a page footer here that I've created. And again, I have the ability to insert data fields here as well, just like I could a minute ago in the header section. And if I take a look at my document, my page footer is at the very bottom of the page, and it would have appeared on every single page. Notice in here that we have the header at the top, the footer at the bottom, and all of our sections that we're going to look at next are in between here. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the sections next. These are sections, and they can be added one at a time for the sections. If I look at my first row here, I have a section type field, which is either going to be header or footer. And notice in here, when those are my two choices, the headers appear before the footers. So in this case, I have 6 sections, and intro, scope, return policy, and details are all going to appear in the header section. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then our footer sections will appear below those. Now again, those are the sections, section headers and footers, not to be confused with the page footers and page headers that we looked at a second ago. In addition, we have sequence numbers here, which basically will tell the system what order I want my headers in and footers. Notice that I have a sequence number here for each of my headers. That's the order they appear in my document. And my footers, it's the same thing. I have numbers here which are going to sequence the order of my footers. So these two together tell it where to put the sections. Notice I have a section ID here that has to be unique. Basically, it's just to remind you what the section is. Notice in the bottom of the section, down here, I have all of the information that's appearing in that section, as well as fields like this one that I've inserted using the Insert Data Field option that I just showed you. The page break option here, normally I have this saved without a page break, so when I run it here, you notice there aren't any page breaks. Just to give you an example how to page break, if you need to respace your document at all, or your agreement I should say, if you put a page break in like I'm putting on the scope section here, and I go ahead and preview it, which I can do from the agreement template, I can take a look at how it's going to look, and notice there it pushed the scope section down into page 2 because I put a page break in there for that. So the preview option allows you kind of to look at how's my agreement coming along, what's it going to look like. I'm going to take the page break back out because I really don't want that in here. The next section is override standard. When you first save one of these rows of a section, like for example this one, it will save that as the original version. You can always have the override here, which allows you to change and save as many times after that as you want. If you ever want to go back to the original, you can uncheck this and it will go back to that original version. Also, if it's unchecked, you cannot edit it here. So if you have a section that you don't want anybody ever to change, you can leave that unchecked in your template, and it will not be changed. At least on the templates, when you're creating the template. The print description is basically telling the system to print this description. When you have that checkbox in the print description area, right here, it's going to take this description and it's going to put it in those sections for the document. So these are all my descriptions that it's put in there and fit in there. And again, I have my header sections with description, followed by my footer sections with description, all printing here. Now, what you can do, which is kind of nice, is when you're working in a section, here's an empty section, and if I was going to begin to build information into this section that's not there right now, I can copy and paste tables in from Word, as well as logos and pictures, any kind of picture that I might have. There also is a table function here. I find it to be a little bit harder to make the tables this way, but you can use the table function here to create a table and edit it inside of the Agreement Designer. I prefer to go into my document like this, and I prefer to copy and paste. Let's highlight my whole section here, and I prefer to copy and paste this way into the table. Once I've edited my table and I copy, I can paste in here, and my table's inserted, formatted the way it is in Word. Also a picture like a logo. If you remember before on our header section we had the built-in logo on here, but I'm going to actually in my section here copy and paste a logo in, so I can do that with other logos that are not inside of Acumatica. So if I take a look at my document here, I have the single source logo here. If I copy that, I can paste that into my section area like this, and I can even change the sizing on it. Small, medium, large, or original, whatever I copied it in as. So you can use this to put pictures in, copy and paste text in, that's pre-formatted in Word, copy and paste tables in, to get your sections to look the way you want them to. I'm going to undo all those changes in here and just make sure that's empty because I don't really have anything. Whoop, still don't have that gone. There we go. I just want to make sure I've got that saved the way I had it there. So anyway, that's how you would insert anything into an area that you're working with. In addition, if we hit the help button here, we do have online help, which can help you if you can't remember anything we talked about here. So the Agreement Designer has its built-in help. You can use that documentation to help you build these as you need to. And next, I want to talk about line templates. So we have a line template here, which is in the document that is basically pulling in the information that you see right here in the middle. And it's actually between my header sections and my footer sections. And it's pulling in tabular data from the details area of the form you're working on. So in this case, it's pulling in the lines off of the service order that are on my quote, service order quote, and inserting them between the header sections and the footer sections. Once those are in here, you can edit and change the fields, and I'll show you in a minute how to create this in HTML or just copy it in. But in here, if I wanted to change this to item number, for example, I can change the description here. I can backspace out my field, and I can insert a different field. So I want to put the item number in here instead of the type. And again, inserting the data field, I happen to know that my item number is on the details field area because we're working with the service order details. And I'm going to find the inventory ID, double click it, and now it's inserted that different field here into the table for my line template details. And so when I run it, again, it's appearing in between my header sections and my footer sections on the document. So if you need information from the form you're working on, that's how you would bring it in. I'm going to undo that and leave the type the way it was. Save it. And what I did want to point out here is that if you have a template that does not have this format in there, the first time you create a template, the line template area is blank, you can copy it from another template that you have. And the way you do that is you click on HTML here, and you're going to copy this into the other template. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to do a Control A here to highlight everything, copy it. Then I'm going to go to a template that I'm working on that does not have line template information on it yet. And if I go here and I change it to HTML, I can paste that HTML in, and voila, there I have my format for my line template. And I can go ahead and start changing the fields and then inserting fields that are set for this particular area. So in here, if you notice, the data fields are not the same because I'm in service contracts, and I can go in and edit or delete the fields that are in there and put in the correct fields that I want in there. So that's how you copy the line template from one agreement template to another. Now, just as a reminder, here you can preview as you're working on this. Remember that you can preview these in the agreement template area, but again, they aren't going to have data on them. You can see here that it shows the data fields that it's going to insert when you run it from the service order, but they're not in here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the service order to show you how do I go. I've created this template. How do I use it now? So since this one is associated with service orders, I'm going to go to the service orders form, and I'm going to go into my quote, and I've run this one several times, so you'll see a duplicate in here of agreements. However, on the agreement tab, before we do that, take a look. We have details in here that have inventory information and the pricing that I'm going to have on the quote, as well as my customer information and everything I might need on the agreement. In here, I can go ahead and create a new agreement, which I'm going to do. And when I create the agreement, it asks me what template am I going to use that's associated with the service order. Well, I associated the service order agreement template with service order, so it's in here, as well as another one in here as well. I'm going to go ahead and select the service order template because that's the one I want to use. Notice it brought in all my sections. It's going to use the rest of the template header and footer that I had in there. But I can change my section areas if I want to edit any of the things in here for this particular service order. Okay. In this case, I don't want to change anything. I like the format that I had. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And so now I have an agreement. Again, it's got an agreement number up here. And I'm going to go ahead and preview that just to see how does it look. And it's going to look similar to what I've been running. And again, it's pulled in the customer information up here and other information like what was on the quote, as well as the quote number up here and quote number here that are appearing on my page headers. So everything looks exactly the same as what I created in the template with the actual information in it from the service order. When I'm finished with that and I know it's good, notice up here I have 3 files already attached here. I can go ahead and generate this, and what that does is it actually attaches it to the form you're working on. So it's actually saying, I think I'm good with this. I'm going to go ahead and generate it. It made the quote down here and it came up down here, but when I go back to my service order and take a look at the files, there's a 4th file there now. So it's actually attached it within the system because we've said that agreement is good. I've sent it to the customer. Now that pretty much covers the agreement designer and how to format an agreement within Acumatica. The next section we're going to go over is the Questionnaire Designer. examples of how you can use a questionnaire designer. We're going to take a look at this example that I have here, which is an inspection for HVAC. In addition to that, you might use this for customer surveys or possibly internal checklists. We're going to use this example to break down how you go through the process of creating a questionnaire template. Under the SSS Productivity Tools menu, there's a questionnaire templates form, which is where you define your questionnaire templates, which can then be used on various forms within Acumatica. If I take a look at my HVAC inspection that I created, the first thing that you're going to end up doing is creating a questionnaire. You'll need to define a question code that's unique. In this case, it's HVAC inspection for the one we're looking at. You'll need a description. And then just like with the agreement designer, you'll need to associate that with the form that you want to run that off of in Acumatica. The file name again is PDF or docx. In this case, I made a smart file name that began with inspect dash and then the current service order number, followed by .pdf. And again, you'll see how you can find those fields throughout this demonstration. You'll notice, in addition to that, you can apply this to one business account, for example, item or item class. The example might be that you have a customer that has you fill out a certain inspection form when you do service for them that you can have inside of the questionnaire templates and just associate it only to show up for that specific customer. I'm going to start with the first section here, the headers, and we'll take a look at how those affected the inspection that we have on up. You'll notice in here, similar to the agreement designer, we have a main header and we have a page header. The page header again is going to appear on every single page. The main header is only going to appear on the very first page, right below the page header. Again, we've pulled in the company logo, and this is what you need to put in there if you do that. You can also right click and paste a logo in as well here if you need to use a logo that's outside the system. For example, for a customer that you might have. The way you would do that is you can right click copy and right click paste into this area here instead of using the other logo. And again, you're able to resize it. You can also copy and paste text or tables from Word as well, similar to the agreement designer. I'm going to take that back out. Data fields again inside of the header and footer area are inserted off of this menu here, and it's going to pull up the fields that are associated with the valid form that you're using. So in this case, I'm using service order, so all of these tables are available with their fields if needed to populate in here. So how did this display? I have the page header here, and I have the full header. And if you take a look at my document here, which I've run, my page header's up at the very top, up here, and right below it is the regular header, which is only going to appear on the first page. My footers are similar as they were in the agreement designer, and I have a main footer, which is only going to appear on the very last page, and I have the availability of a page footer and the same option to be able to insert data fields there as well. text, copy and paste from Word or enter in, as well as the ability to copy tables if necessary. In this case, I just have a regular header, which is basically giving the text some requirements of what they're supposed to do on the HVAC visit. And as you can see, that appears at the very bottom of my document here. I don't have a page footer. I just have a regular footer. But in any case, my headers are up top and my footers are at the bottom, and in between are my questions that you see in the middle portion of the screen in here. These are our actual inspection that we're performing from the service order. Okay, so how did I get this format for my sections in here? If I go to my questionnaire template and I look at the steps are what are going to get filled out on the inspection. Notice in here that I have a step code that is unique, and then I have sections and sequences here, and you'll notice there's a group sequence 10 which appears on a few lines, and then 20, and then 30, and then within that I have a subsequence which is a sequence here 10, 20, 30 within 10. So in here I have 3 rows associated with group sequence 10. One of them is a header, and then 2 text boxes. And when I take a look at my completed survey, that section appears right here. You see those 3 rows right here. And then to the right of it is our next section, which is the visit info section. And if you take a look at that starts with a 20. It's got a header, and then each of the sequences that fall below that header for sequence 20. Now, the way that this works is that the header here, if you look at the second header, it is a break type of column over here. What that means is that take this section and put it directly to the right of the last section in the same area on the screen. So what that did was it made a column to the right of the first group sequence, and so you'll see that the visit info section right here is directly to the right of the site info section. And that's because we told the header that it was a column header, meaning put it to the right of the section before it. Okay, and again, I have several text fields there as well that I've put in that section, and it places them appropriately based on the spacing that it has. It's recommended that you don't go over 4 columns, in that it just gets too tight on the document. Even 3 is probably tight on the document. It will automatically try to space it appropriately based on what space it has and what's filled out on the survey. Now in here we have a header at our first header, which was to the left. Then we have a header here that was a column to the right, and then I want to show you the next one, which is a section header right here, and that tells it to not stay in the next column to the right, but go down and start a new section below our prior sections. So in here, if you look, our complete section, which is where our questions are all in the document, appears below our last section. So because I had that designated as a section header, it pushed that down to the next row down here and made another section. Now in here I only have this is all group sequence 30. That's the last section in my group sequence in my document, so there's just one section for all of my questions here. and our sequence numbers are in order 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. So that's how you use the header to define your columns and sections within your questionnaire. And again, we are formatting this in the Questionnaire Designer, and later we're going to fill it out, and you'll see it filled out on the service order itself. So let's take a look at some of the other fields here. You'll notice in here that we have various types of types under the type column here. Our headers I just talked about, those define our sections in the Questionnaire Designer. And then we have some that are text box, and those simply are fill-in text text areas that you have for those questions. So each of these is a question, and you just fill out the field for it. And you can see in here, these are all questions here that we had that were answered by the technician to fill out the survey. Other types that we have here, we have ones that are drop down. So when they got to this particular step, they were recording the thermostat type for the HVAC unit. Okay, and the way that you can actually define your values for that is that when you're on this row in the Questionnaire Designer, if you click on the edit button right here, that's where you can go to the detail of that and fill in the options in there. Notice in here for my drop down, I had 4 possible selections: non-programmable, programmable, Wi-Fi, and smart. And I also had a result: warn if it was non-programmable, meaning we might want to tell the customer to upgrade their thermostat, and then pass if they were one of these types of thermostat. And so when this was filled out, the technician selected non-programmable from the drop down, and it colored it yellow in that particular field. So that's how you can define a drop-down box for one of the questions on your questionnaire that you have. Okay, so up here we had text fields. Now we just looked at a drop-down type field, and now we're going to then take a look at check boxes. Oops, I need to. So the check boxes, you'll notice in here, are all selected, and that's basically just me checking the box. Did I do it? Okay, that's a very simple option in there. The next one is numeric, which in this particular case we're checking the PSI pressure, and we can assign values. If I click on the edit, we can assign values to warn or to pass the pressure on the PSI pressure. Okay, if I click the edit button in there, you'll see that I have some values set in here. I'm going to default that field to 0. The minimum I could ever record is 0 up to 300. If it's above 35 or below 145, it's going to pass. And between 30 and 35, it's going to warn us that, hey, we're getting close to low PSI pressure. And if it's between 145 and 150, it's going to also warn us. So what this allows you to do is then when you complete your survey, it will color code warnings on the inspection. So let's see what our recording was for the survey that we just did here. And in that case, we entered a 25, meaning we only had PSI pressure of 25. And based on our template, that was below the lowest level it could be. Again, between 30 and 35 would have been a warning, but below 30 is going to end up being a fail. And so what it did is it failed it, and we saw red on our on that particular question in our Questionnaire Designer. Okay, so that's kind of how a numeric field works. You're going to enter the value in there, and then it's going to define whether it's in yellow, green, or red based on how you have it set up. And the last one I want to show you is a radio set box. Okay, and the radio set box, if we take a look at it, we have options in there, and this is for checking the piping for leaking. Okay, so in this case, we've got two values in there that are going to be on a radio, the radio buttons. We have no leak, which is a pass, and we have leaking, which is a fail in there. And so those are the two options I will be able to select on our radio button. And if we take a look in there, what was selected, no leak was selected. It displayed it in green because that's a pass. Okay, and so we have those various options. So we covered headers, text boxes, drop downs, check boxes, and numeric and radio set types. Those are each of the types. And when we go to fill the survey out, you'll see those again, how they actually display when it's filled out. And we'll do the same, a similar survey for that one. The next thing I want to talk about here is the required field. You'll notice in here there is a required field, and we have required on most things. You can't require a checkbox. A checkbox is just going to be a check, but everything else can be required. So when it's being filled out, if you fail to complete that step, it's going to give you an error message. It's going to validate and give you an error message. Notice in here that this particular text box is not required, and that's the site number, because when we go on site to an HVAC customer, they may or may not have a site number depending on how big of a customer it is. And way over to the right, I have a skip value of NA here, meaning if I don't enter a site number, not going to be a required text box, it will display this value in that field. And so if we take a look in this survey, there was no site, and it automatically displayed NA in that field. So that's how you can use the skip value within a text box for a non-required field. All these other fields, city, date of maintenance, check-in, check-out, are all required. So you can define which ones are required. Notice on the drop-downs, it's the same thing. We can require a drop-down to be filled out. We can require a numeric field to be filled out, and we can have a radio set required to be filled out. The only ones you can't do that with are check boxes. Also, you saw the description field here, and on the description, you notice that within the inspection document, that description appears for each of those rows in here, even the questions. Okay, so those descriptions are always going to appear in that section. The allow comments option, which is right here, puts a formatted field there for comments. And notice that on all of my questions, obviously not the header, because the header is just the header of the section. On all of these, I have allow comments. So what that means is that I can fill the comment out, and it will size it appropriately. I have comments on all of my questions here, meaning that the technician, when they're on site, can put comments in. And notice in here we had a couple of comments, like the blower was dirty, check the blower and bearings, and the cooling operations were cooling to spec. Okay, so the comments section will appear properly right next to your value that each of those rows equates to. So as I'm filling my survey out, I'm going to select non-programmable. I'm going to check the blower and bearings, and I have a comment option there, and I can put a comment in, which you'll see when I fill the survey out. Okay. I think we covered all of these fields. The next thing you can do is, as you're working on creating this and you want to see how the format's coming out, you have the preview option similar to Agreement Designer. And when you run it, it displays very generically how your columns are going to line up and your options in there that you have. Okay? So you can use that as you're designing the form. The last part of this is actually filling out a survey. So I want to go back and fill that survey out, and we'll bounce back and forth between that and our questionnaire template here to just see again, how did we format that and how did it come out when we actually did it. So I'm going to go into service orders, which is where this form is linked to in our valid for that we looked at earlier. And I'm going to go into this. I've been using this same service order number, but normally you would not do that. Our questionnaire, I run this a number of times here as I was checking it. You would not have any questionnaires in here. You probably are going to, on one service order, only have one questionnaire, one survey, unless you go out twice. I'm going to go ahead and add one in here. And the first thing I have to do is I've got to select a questionnaire code. So which questionnaires are associated with service orders? There are several in here. And I'm going to select the one that I've been working on, which is the HVAC inspection. And I'm going to save it. Now notice in here, there were some other fields. If I wanted to, I could have assigned a due date here, meaning I've got to do this by today. Also, it automatically brought in the a customer I was working on, but I also could have the item or the equipment identified. So if this was equipment number 90009, this equipment right here, equipment number on the system, I could assign that. I could also have associated with an item. The question date and the question by field get filled out automatically when the technician or whoever it is filling out the survey, depending on what kind of survey it is. It will fill out the date and the question by based on the person that's logged in. I'm going to go ahead and save that with that equipment information on it. And at this point, I'm ready. Notice that I have the steps in here. I could change how this is going to work. I can make some changes to this on this particular service order. It's using the default setup that I have for my inspection. But I could go in here and make some changes to make certain things not required, or to take out parts of the survey I don't need, or the inspection I don't need. But I'm going to leave this intact as we set it up, exactly the same. And when I when I get ready to go, I'm going to go through each of these and we'll look back at our template to say, how did we define that again? So you get to look at it again. So when the technician's ready, in this case off of the service order, to enter the questionnaire in, it's going to come up. Now, the site number was not required. So again, if you remember, on our site number field, if I go back here, my site number field was not required. Okay. So when I go to fill it out, I'm going to leave that blank, and it's going to associate that skip value NA to it. Notice it was not required. Now in here, the city is required. So if I try to click next here, I'm going to get an error message. It's a text box that had a required field. I'm going to go ahead and fill that out. Our date of maintenance, these are all required, so if I don't fill them out correctly, it's going to give me an error and not let me to continue. There's my date of maintenance. I checked in at 8 o'clock a.m. I checked out at 9 o'clock a.m. Store manager. And this is where I've got certain required fields again that have to be filled out, but this was our drop-down box, right? Now in here, if I select any of those three values, programmable, Wi-Fi, or smart, it's going to show up green on here. If I were to select non-programmable, because that was a worn option in our template, it's going to show up yellow. I'm going to go ahead this time and select programmable. I could make a comment because I had comments associated with that row in my questionnaire template. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And each of these can be filled out. Now if I put a comment in, remember it's going to stick that in that section, and we had allow comments for all of these rows in our steps. You'll see I'm going to put in dirty blower again. Needs cleaning. And each of these other checks here, I'm going to go ahead and select that I've completed them. And here is the PSI pressure. So in here, I'm going to put in a value between 30 and 35 here, which is in my warning area, warning numbers. So we'll do 33, and we'll see what happens there. It's right on the borderline of failing based on the numeric setup we had. And I'm going to go ahead and check my condenser fan and motor blades. And this was a radio box, and it's a required field. If I were to try to hit next, it's going to tell me it's required. I've got to either select pipe leaking or no leak. And I'm going to select no leak again, which would make it appear green because that was a pass. Pipe leaking was a fail in that row in our steps. And I'm going to check the cooling operation. In this case, I'm going to put a comment in there that it's cooling to spec. And I'm going to click finish. Now, when I've done that, similar to the agreement designer, inside of this questionnaire, I can hit the preview button. And if I take a look here at my inspection, notice in here that it smart numbered my inspection based on the service order number, which is what I had in the field when I set that template up. It created that file name with a Smarts file name, and this is what it looked like filled out. Again, these were text fields. Because I did not fill out anything on the site number, it automatically put in NA in there, which was my skip value. And then all of these were text fields that were filled out. My thermostat type was programmable. It was a passing type thermostat. These checks were in there. Notice that when I put a comment in, it appeared to the right here. Those sections had comments available for them. My PSI pressure was between 30 and 35, so that appeared yellow. And my no leak was pass as well here, so it appeared green. Everything now is filled out correctly. My inspection looks good. What I can do here now is generate it, and what generate does is it actually attaches it to the service order, meaning this is a completed survey, completed inspection, and I'm going to associate it with this form. So remember, you can create these on various forms in the system. And again, it generated a number there, but if I were to go back to my service order, you'll see there's a file that was just generated in there today. This one right here, the second one right there. And so once you click generate, it will attach it to the service order or any other form that you might be working at with a questionnaire. That covers the Questionnaire Designer. Again, if you see any forms that it's not attached to on the system, let us know, and we can let Single Source know, and we can include that additional form that you might need a questionnaire on into the system. It just takes a small amount of work on our part. Thank you.